You know, it is ironic that I'm filming this during what has been a very wet summer here in the UK, but we're here now. Let's do it. Heatwaves. Fined by the Met Office in the UK as 3 consecutive days above a certain hot temperature. They can be deadly. In fact, to pose a massive risk, these heatwaves might not even need to be long, they just need to be hot. In the UK, a heat period is defined by the UK Health Security Agency as being at least 1 day of having an amber heat alert, or England's mean temperature being over 20 degrees Celsius. Now, you may feel like these periods are few and far between, but actually the frequency and intensity of heat waves are increasing rapidly. So the world is getting hotter, the summers are getting longer, and the maximum temperature is rising. But how is this going to affect you? How might this affect your health? A report was recently produced by the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology on this very topic. So let's dig into it to find out. 10 hottest years on record since 1884 have all occurred since 2003, and hot days, those above 25 degrees Celsius in the UK, are projected to increase in frequency from 37 to 55 days out of the year because of climate change. One study has projected that by 2050, assuming no further climate adaptation and an ageing population, that UK heat deaths could increase from 2.52 to 7.8 per 100,000 people. And that's in the least severe scenario. It could increase to an average of 24.11 deaths in the most severe scenario, a 12-fold increase. Therefore, right off the bat, heat is tangibly linked to death rates. Now, why could that be? Well, when the body is exposed to heat, it tries to maintain a stable core temperature in a process called thermoregulation. It involves 2 main mechanisms: more sweating and something called vasodilation, which is where blood flow is redistributed towards the skin in order to lose excess heat. Now, in a perfectly healthy human, that's fine, but the main danger that heat poses is exacerbating pre-existing health conditions, as well as things like heat stroke and dehydration. High temperatures exacerbate the symptoms of chronic diseases, with an average of 1,780 hospital admissions every year being associated with warm days. This has major impacts on the NHS. In fact, during the extreme heatwaves in 2022, 1 in 5 doctors reported having to cancel surgeries due to staff and bed shortages. Let's go back to thermoregulation for a moment though. The body's ability to thermoregulate decreases with age, and so the greatest proportion of heat-related deaths are seen within those aged 65 and over. This is evidenced by a 57% increase in death rates among this generation in 2022, the heatwave year, compared to 2002. Cardiovascular and respiratory diseases are the main causes of mortality during heatwaves, both in England and globally. Cardiovascular disease is impacted because redistributing blood to the skin, that process of vasodilation, puts strain on the heart. Meanwhile, respiratory disease is impacted by poor air quality, and both are exacerbated by dehydration. Now, these are the heat effects on physical health, and they are interesting, but perhaps more interesting is the impact on the broader public health. Let me tell you what I mean. Interesting trends emerge when you look at the impact of heat on violence and crime and accidents. Violence and crime increase with heat. An analysis of the Metropolitan Police statistics from 2010 to 2018 comes up with an increased average crime rate of 14% when temperatures were above 18 degrees Celsius. And it's thought that this might be due to an increase in social behaviour and alcohol consumption. Meanwhile, accidents and unintentional injuries also increase with heat. In the UK, every 5 degrees Celsius increase of maximum daily temperature is associated with a 1.8% increase in trauma admissions. A study of drownings in the UK conducted between 2012 and 2019 showed an increase in drowning risk for males of 7% for every 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature. So all of this taken together, if heat has such a large impact on our health, why is it not more advertised? The answer is that England is typically and culturally cold and wet. Heat awareness is not a priority in the UK. And there are issues with its construction, infrastructure and policy. Alcohol and binging, for example, a major cultural phenomenon in the UK, exacerbates dehydration and heat injuries. Plus, 83% of the UK population currently lives in urban and built-up areas, and this number is projected to rise by 2050. That's an issue because of the urban heat island effect, a phenomenon where urban areas are usually a lot hotter than surrounding rural ones. This comes as a result of several processes all combining. You have materials like concrete absorbing heat. You have fewer green and water spaces. You have tall buildings trapping heat, and you have just the hustle and bustle of human activity producing heat as well. The urban heat islands of English cities can be up to 10 degrees Celsius hotter than surrounding rural areas. It makes a big difference, and a large proportion of the UK's population live in those areas, and so put at risk. Now, socioeconomic status is also directly linked to heat-related health problems. Those with less are more likely to have poor health, live in poor quality housing, and have less access to green spaces. Across the board, though, there is a lack of education surrounding the dangers of heat. Therefore, there is much less understanding of how to respond to it. In conclusion, the health impacts of heat are not evenly distributed across the country. They're instead increased by population density, the built environment, and socioeconomic profile. Many affordable houses have not been designed to effectively deal with heat, and so lack proper insulation or ventilation. A lot of this is the case because ultimately there are fewer hot days in the UK compared to other countries, but the risk is still there and is increasing. So what are a few things that can be done to increase governmental heat awareness? Published in 2023, the Adverse Weather and Health Plan constitutes an overarching government policy framework for weather and health. Now, early warning health alerts are amongst the most cost-effective interventions to protect public health. So the Adverse Weather and Health Plan is underpinned by an impact-focused heat health alert system. Think about alerts that pop up on your phone when it's particularly hot or there are thunderstorms forecast. Alerts are great. However, 40% of adults have claimed to never have seen information on how to protect themselves during a heat wave. And if you ask vulnerable populations, then that number goes even higher. Therefore, there remains work to be done on raising awareness of the dangers of heat and what constitutes a heat wave. We can start by protecting the vulnerable, identifying people and places at particular high risk. Then we can improve the heat resilience of buildings, as is acknowledged by the Heat and Building Strategy of 2021. We should also be conscientious of how we go about doing that. More sustainable passive cooling heat solutions are needed compared to those which will increase emissions, and so add to the heat problem. At the forefront of these passive solutions is minimizing the amount of heat which enters buildings in the first place, using things like shutters, shades, insulation, and green roofs. This also means using energy efficient designs, heat management using high ceilings, and passive ventilation. Now, a lack of mandatory reporting limits progress, and also the Green Plan of the NHS does not address heat risks. So, there is a need to change public perceptions about heat, because right now people are not sufficiently aware of the risks that it poses, and they're also not sufficiently aware of the actions that they can take to make a positive change. There needs to be a joint approach here across multiple sectors, as positive impacts in one will trickle down to others, but the more happening more immediately, the better. All in all though, the health impacts of heat will become more apparent as the country increases in temperature. It will be important to increase awareness of both the dangers of heat and the actions that people can take to prevent major heat damage. Increasing awareness of the dangers that heat can pose to the human body, as well as integrating heat awareness into policy, have to be government priorities. But remember that awareness doesn't just have to come from government. It can come from you or I too. So, although it may not feel super necessary at present with the weather being terrible, do take care this summer and in summers to come as the days heat up. Prioritize wearing sun cream, prioritize staying in the shade, and prioritize staying hydrated. Thanks for watching this episode of Science Fairs. If you found it interesting, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss another video. We hope to see you in the next one.